Please be aware this will be a spoiler-filled discussion.
So I've been watching lots of like Paul Thomas Anderson interviews, kind of like as I've been watching his filmography, right? Trying to get like in the head of this cokehead, right? And and he says one of his criticisms of kind of film school, and you yourself, Mattie O'Neill, uh,
Remember,
are
I'm not at film school. I am doing film.
but you are a film student, a
Yeah,
student
okay.
of the game, one may say. And he was saying he thinks it's a mistake that film schools like start with showing you like films from the 30s that like no 18-year-old new student is going to be enthusiastic about. It's going to feel so alienating and like
Hmm.
dry, and like even though you're like, yes, I know it's important, it's like it makes it feel like boring, right? So he was saying like film schools should start with showing you like obvious kind of popular new stuff and explaining
Hmm.
how it's rooted in the classics, like explaining how like Citizen Kane influenced, like, I don't know, like a uh, a relatively popular film that came out in the past,
Yeah,
like a Midsummer or something. um and that would just make it more
engaging.
accessible, engaging, and like urgent, right?
Yeah,
How do you feel about that, or do you feel that's a
I
weird way
think
of
I think that's so true. I think, and it's a testament to why I was so happy with my first term of studying film, and why I was kind of less happy with my second term. So basically, I still really like my second term, but anyway, basically we had a module that was basically just every week we were shown a film, and then we would read about it, read essentially like discussion around it. So, for example, we one week we were doing genre cinema, so we watched Pan's Labyrinth, and then we read an essay on genre. We read like three essays on genre cinema, and it was amazing because genre cinema is something, and genre fiction has existed for a very long time. Genre cinema functions quite uniquely from genre fiction. Uh, in other art forms. But it was great. It was such a great way to do it because when you basically summed it up perfectly is like, man, okay, I have loved some great old films like the 39 Steps. That's a fucking awesome movie, and that's my favorite Hitchcock film. 39 Steps bangs. But it's hard. It feels different, and it's not just because like it look bad. It's because the story is told in different ways a lot of the time, and that's hard and inaccessible. It's the same as if you watch a new director's work who makes really weird or unique stuff nowadays. It's equally as inaccessible, just for a different reason.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't think we should punish the kids who wanted to become directors because of Fincher or Tarantino. Anyway,
no,
hey everyone, welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast. So we're ticking all the boxes and bringing a much needed minority perspective into popular internet discourse. I'm Josh, and I lead the music discussions.
I'm Mattie and I lead the film discussions. And it's my sleepover, and Mum said I get to pick the film. No, I'm joking. So today we're talking about the new. What do I call underwater? Let's say cosmic horror thriller. Yeah, I think that's cosmic. I'm gonna call it that. Cosmic horror thriller underwater, directed by William Eubank, and I'll give that more of an introduction when we go on to talk about it. But as this is very much a film tied up in genre fiction and genre cinema, Josh wanted to have a little chat, little ditty about genre cinema and fiction itself.
Yeah, so I mean, when we talk about genre fiction in like a broader sense, I guess my background is probably more in academically speaking. I have more experience with like literature than film. I've never studied film. So like when I think about genre fiction and literature, it's more so like sci-fi novels will deal with sci-fi themes, and it's
Yes.
like they're going to be interested in not necessarily sci-fi structure of like how to tell a sci-fi story, but rather like the types of things sci-fi is interested in, like free will and agency and like AI.
Yeah.
Whereas genre cinema, at least in the mainstream, especially in like pulpy cinema, seems to be can be very much about tropes, and we have to hit these tropes to do this genre film, right? So like go and see any kind of mainstream horror film, like an Annabelle or a Paranormal Activity. They're gonna kind of hit the beats of the horror film. Same with like slashers, right? They'll hit the slasher beats, you know. And films like Cabin in the Woods are great kind of thesis statements on explaining like what these beats are precisely.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, like, do you think this is a cool thing, as in like there's a kind of structure that anyone can take up and do something really interesting and provocative with, or do you think this is like a weirdly insidious and horrible practice in cinema that like Underwater just leads to like regurgitating the same film again and again and again and kind of getting very complacent in it? I mean, how do you feel about I guess genre cinema in the mainstream? Because this is, in my opinion, a mainstream kind of film.
I think so. There's two levels I want to discuss this on. There's the film student level, and then there's the person who just really enjoys watching horror films in two different ways. I think I'll go through the film student. Actually, no, I'll answer your question first, and then I'll move on to like the film student discussion of genre cinema.
Go off.
Time to go off. Okay, so as a person who loves complete garbage a lot of the time, specifically just because she loves these, I think when you bring up tropes, the word I use is markers. I do adore markers of, ooh, big scary monster, ooh, watch out for scary man, he can make gore happen. I love it. I find it really entertaining, and I think it birds a lot of very strange creativity that might not show itself up so much in story, but in hindsight or just in pure visceral experiences, it can be endlessly entertaining. However, there is also the person that really, really loves, I guess what you would call quote unquote cerebral horror. And this is not to say like, whoa, bro, I got the mind stone. I'm to thinking when I'm scared. But Ari Aster and Robert Eggers have made some of the best films had made some of the best films of the 2010s by considering what fear is and what fear means for us as people. And these function both viscerally as creative experiences and stories, but also as thematic statements. And I think that this is always going to be more valuable in a way. I think I think this is shown by the fact that, like, I mean, just from my level, I think It Follows is a much lesser experience than any of the filmmakers' works that I've mentioned. And that's because
always chatting shit about It Follows.
It Follows is
it's a good film.
It's good, but it's just anyway.
Okay. I'll let you finish.
I think that I think that fear. I'd also like to bring up climax. I think that fear is a uniquely wonderful way of exploring emotion and the human condition, in the same way that the concepts of sci-fi novels like A Scanner Darkly, Substance D, are for exploring the human condition. In that same way, I think horror is carrying the weight that, other than Alex Garland, that science fiction has let go as of late. These markers that I bring up, these markers are things that have been essentially appropriated, I think, from significant films and have led to horror being the misunderstood genre that it is. I understand I 100% contribute to that by being like, damn, I love it when, like, bad movie go fun gore. But at the same time, I think the reason that films like The Exorcist can be misunderstood and films like that from the past is that the horror markers that they created have been again appropriated into films that turn these markers into thriller minute instant gratification things that it don't mean as much and make people misconstrue what horror is about. Um, but then yeah, there's obviously two sides to horror going on today. I can do the film student spiel on genre now, or you can respond to that. Which one?
I like to talk. So earlier on, you said that you think art house horror is ultimately more valuable than tropey horror.
Yeah, no,
And
which is not the most. I don't think that's a revolutionary statement by any means.
because personally, I don't agree with that. I'd argue art house horror, ironically, is more accessible than tropey horror. So for someone like me, I don't like watching loads of schlocky horror films. So
Yeah,
putting like a tropey horror film in front of me is one of the most boring things you can do. Like
yeah,
knowing this is just gonna do the horror film thing that I'm not super into all the time
yeah.
is very dull. Whereas something like Ari Aster or uh Eggers is like, oh yeah, this is just a film where interesting stuff will happen outside of the tropes that I'm not that into,
Okay,
and that makes it like more accessible to someone like me who isn't super into schlocky horror films, right? Um,
but
but then I also think,
so how do you disagree? What's the?
oh, I'm just saying I don't think it's inherently more valuable. I just think it's more accessible. Like I think it feels more valuable because it speaks to a wider net of people. Whereas like these kind of pulpy, tropey horror films are really just made for a specific crowd who are into that thing. So it's kind of it just feels a bit more insular and like fan servicey, I guess. And it can get away with being less ambitious. But again, like a film like Get Out, I would argue Get Out is a completely conventional is a pretty in terms of form a pretty conventional horror film that does the horror things in the order that the horror things have to happen in. uh but what sets Get Out apart from a film like Underwater is just how thematically ambitious Get Out is. Like it's trying to say so much more with the tropes. So again, I don't think it's inherently damning using the tropes.
No, I don't think it
Yeah.
is either. I would say even that. Hereditary. I wouldn't say that films like Hereditary and films like The Witch and The Lighthouse and Midsummer as well. I would say all of these films don't. They these films. I'm not saying they're not. They never use these markers or these tropes or whatever you want to call them. And I would include Get Out amongst those things. I think it's all just about execution and what you're trying to do with them. And I think just for me, when I feel that these markers are being used for a higher thematic statement, it is more valuable just for me.
Yeah.
But that's also with the like I can love these films just as much as like a pulpy Nightmare on Elm Street thing. I think the type of the type of stuff that I really really have no patience for is like the Conjuring cinematic universe, the like that's the stuff where I'm like, this is just nothing.
But these are subgenres within shocky horror. So you're into like monster horror, and someone who's super into like ghost horror will look at your films and be like, that is nothing. It's just rah, scary monster. I really like ghost shit. Like someone like Mike Stoklasky, you know.
No, yeah, definitely.
So again, it's so like it has to be fan service. It's like specifically for people who are going to
Yeah,
like it anyway.
that's fair. No, I
What
do
you said
see
about
that.
execution is really interesting because it's really hard. I wonder if it's difficult for people who aren't into the genre to know when something's doing it better than another thing. So like
Mm.
bring it to like rom-coms, for example, where rom-coms have a very strict formula, like popular American rom-coms,
Oh
very
yeah.
formulaic. And look at like two films that came out in the space of the same 2 years about the same topic. The Breakup, starring Jennifer Aniston, and Vince Vaughn, and Forgetting Sarah Marshall, starring Jason Segel and Kristen Bell and Russell
Oh
Brand.
yeah.
Like unanimously, most people would agree that Forgetting Sarah Marshall is like a better film than The Breakup, as in it just does the comedy better. The characters are more interesting and endearing, and I don't think Forgetting Sarah Marshall really has like a bigger statement. Like, I actually like the message of The Breakup, even though I think it's a really bad film. It's awful, actually. But I wonder if like criticizing within the genre fiction is easier to do when you actually like the genre fiction. Like, I like rom-coms, whereas
Yeah,
somebody who just hates American rom-coms, would Forgetting Sarah Marshall and The Breakup be indistinguishable?
yeah, no, I think to an extent, I think there's for me when I watch something in a genre that I'm maybe more skeptical towards or less familiar with, I always try and approach it with a grain of salt. But when I feel like I'm being treated like I'm an idiot, I think it helps you differentiate not the fact that being less familiar with it, but that feeling of I have given my time to something and I feel like a moron for it, and it can help you appreciate when you've given time to something that you're less familiar with, and you feel rewarded. And even if you don't love it, it's a special experience in its own way. I think in terms of genre fiction in cinema as a whole, I think what's fascinating is a point made by certain film theorists, and that is that genre it isn't markers and it isn't these objective things. It's essentially defined by an audience and their response to it, because essentially genre is created by people seeing films and grouping them together. It's based on those markers to an extent, but the actual act of genreification, if that's a word, is done by the audience. And for me, I think maybe it's time to start getting onto to Underwater. Something like this film is so disappointing, almost in a way because of its markers. Well, partially because of cool big monster in it, and it not as good as could have been, but also because I find it challenging to categorize and give purpose to the story of this film in tandem with the markers it uses. But yeah, I think that's what's so fascinating about film fiction to me. And if you have anything more you want to say about genre fiction in cinema, or we can move on to the film discussion.
Yeah, well, how about we give them a rundown of what happens in Underwater?
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so in Underwater, we are transported 7 miles below the sea's surface to a sort of generic, and I don't mean that meanly, just generic underwater base, doing some drilling or something, or researching, whatever. It doesn't matter. I cannot emphasize how little it matters. And immediately there is an explosion caused by quote unquote earthquake, and we follow our point of view character Nora, played by Kristen Stewart, just essentially trying to survive and uncovering what happened to cause this absolute disaster that is bringing this station down to its knees. I'll start off very briefly. I'll start off because I do want to hear what Josh has to say, and I think I've spoken a bit already. I don't think I've ever found a film like this so boring, and I say this about a film with a huge budget, with all the means to execute anything they would want to, that could provide a satisfying sense of cosmic or just sheer monster horror. I really did. I want to underpin why I picked this film, and then therefore why that's made me so disappointed. I really did pick this hoping it would just be a a pulpy or at least thriller minute a deep sea monster movie, which is like my shit. This is my jam. But with a budget that could really, really bring home the like sense of scale and epicness that I really, really want from these movies. And often when I watch these films with a lower budget, it can be just simply boring on a visceral level because they simply do not have the budget to execute the things that would be thrilling. And so why I was hopeful for this one was because it seemed competently shot and acted, and also with a budget high enough to make it thrilling, and it just didn't deliver. I have more deep criticisms of it, but god damn, I was bored, I can't lie. Josh, what about you?
Yeah, I found this to be a really frustrating film to watch. And it reminded me a lot of the Roger Ebert quote about Battlefield Earth from 2000, where he says the director Roger Christian has seen better films and learnt that directors sometimes tilt their cameras, but he has not learnt why. And that really reminded me of this, where it felt like William Eubank has seen Alien.
Yes, yeah,
and aliens as well, and saw a female lead, a team. One of them's funny; they have distinct personalities. An intrigue about the kind of creature we're dealing with, but he doesn't understand why those original films were so effective and why they have become the icons they are. So what we get is a really weird, hollow rehearsal of the same tropes and dull, tired cliches. And, okay, one thing as a horror fan I need to ask you about is I love horror, but it's more so like specific horror films as opposed to like I can watch any film in this type of horror and enjoy it. Other than slashes, I enjoy pretty much all slashes.
Slashes bang. Slashes are beautiful movies.
Jump scares are bad, right? Like, do jump scares have an effect on you? Because as someone who I'm not very easily jolted, right? I just don't react to things that way. Like my brain doesn't process it that way. I genuinely hate jump scares. I find them annoying and obnoxious and take me out of the film where it's like, that thing wouldn't make that noise. I'm very hyper aware that someone in an editing room added a loud noise. And I'm even more offended when they happen, and it happens in this film when it's like they see like a squid and they and it's nothing to do with the plot. It was just like, oh, it's been 10 minutes and nothing's happened. Let's just throw a loud noise in there and like cut to an animal that has nothing to do with anything. Is this okay as like a fan of the genre, or do I just not get it? Because I can't abide by it.
So I think you're perfectly fine to have criticism of jump scares. I think my problem with them is they stifle creativity, and what I mean by that is we have ended up in a hegemony of jump scares where many horror films believe that what you really need to be scary is room go quiet or environment go quiet in anticipation of loud noise. And that setup is so tired now. And like, it's just exploitative, basically. It's just exploitative. And but what I say about stifling creativity worries me. It's because the fact that these directors have become so heavily dependent on this trope makes me wonder, do they have the creativity in the first place? And this is not to say that jump scares were never good and are always bad. I think when they're because they're not even really jump scares at this point. They're just, because that word is so tapped now. But what I mean is just, I think when there's an organic just, oh shit, suddenly the monster or scary man is here, and it's not the very classic, again, room go quiet, loud noise. If it's just boom, scary thing, I don't even know if you could call that a jump scare anymore because that word has been through so many layers of filtration.
Yeah, and this brings us to like what's in back kind of back to the genre cinema discussion where I wonder, can you selectively pick, well, people are interested in genres for a reason, I'm sure.
Mm,
And why the reason I like slashers a lot is because no matter how dumb the slasher is, the mark of a good slasher is just how creative king they get with the
yeah.
kills. And it's really difficult to just do the most boring kill possible. Like you're very encouraged as a slasher director to just go as over the top and creative. Like one of my favorite scenes in a slasher fiction is Final Fantasy Five, Final Fantasy Five, Final Destination Five.
Sorry, that was really good. Sorry,
With
go on.
the acrobat scene where she's
Oh,
doing the whole routine and you're just waiting, will that kill her? Will that kill her? Will that kill her? And when it finally comes, it's so satisfying. Whereas
it's fucking horrible scene. It's
I guess like with the jump scare thing, it just like you said, it seems to actively negate creativity. Like it's
yeah.
there to wake you up because the film is boring and nothing is happening.
I
Um,
so agree, and it's
yeah.
so sad to me because I think we're approaching a time where we had the fall of prosthetics and practical effects in the 90s and now we're entering the stage where you can have high budget CGI creatures that are really convincing and awesome, and I think the creature at the end of this is fucking like it's a great moment and awesome. And so I think we could have this glorious period of like, oh my god, that is truly horrifying and it looks incredibly real. Despite the fact that it lacks a physical presence, but we're just stuck in this monotony, and I am so sick of it. And it's really, as a like I guess fan of just trash like this could be. Like it wouldn't even be trash though if um if it was just exciting, if it was just thrilling. I want to go through like why I found the ride of watching this so disappointing really quickly, and I think I want to start off by talking about how you mentioned the inspiration of Alien, but because it does Alien wrong, because the explosion of everything going wrong is in the first 5 minutes. And I'm not saying just do Alien and have an hour before before scary things show up, but have something because I have no idea who these people are. I really don't. It's not even a thing of like, oh, when they die, I don't care. It's a thing of like, these people are boring and I don't understand who they are. I don't understand their conversational dynamics, so I don't enjoy watching them interact. So I'm bored. Also, there is no interesting monster stuff happening right now because this film spends a profound amount of time on like the base going wrong instead of like cool monsters. And when the monsters do show up, it's like these boring humanoid fish things. So it's just such a like boring mess of the film constantly branching. The film constantly reaches points where it could go interesting or really boring, and it's just consistently going to the most boring part, despite the fact that it has all the resources and all the means to go fucking awesome or just bizarre.
I guess in defense of the film, I thought the opening scene was the best scene in the film. Um,
Damn.
I thought there was some really competent directing happening with kind of the pans through the corridors. And
Yeah,
I felt like it was quite claustrophobic with the water rising and the running, and then her seeing people trying to get there and trying to save them,
oh
and
yeah, that was dark.
the guy being like, "Bro, it's over. You just gotta let them die." Like that was that was a good hook for me. I was like, okay, I'm interested. I want to see how these two people's friendship grows over time. Sadly, I forgot that a trope of this genre is to kill black people as early as possible. So unfortunately, that character died in like the next 10 minutes. Which, like,
Why would
I
you?
genuinely, I can't believe that happened in 2020. Like, Scream came out
Yeah.
20 years ago and made fun of this trope. Like, scary movies come out and made fun of this trope. These aren't like high. This is lowbrow films making fun of the trope, and the fact that
Yeah.
this has the goal to. But anyway, I guess one thing that really frustrates me with this is I feel like okay, I feel like there was a weird amount of like ambition here that either was forgotten or miss or just sidestepped in the
I
sense that
agree.
we talk about like what makes a monster film good, and I admit I don't love monster films, but I assume what would make a monster film good is interesting monsters, right? Um, and in this film, I remember as we were watching it, I kind of drew a comparison between this and like Silent Hill 2, where there was this recurring motif of characters who had like lost someone to death. So Kirsten Stewart had lost her old boyfriend and or husband, and the kind of captain of the team had lost his daughter. And so, and there's a thing about like Kirsten does a monologue about feeling tiny in the face of cosmic horror. I thought, okay, maybe they're trying to say something about like the cosmic horror here. The real cosmic horror is the kind of grief that one feels and how small and
Hmm.
helpless you feel in the face of like senseless tragedy that happens in your life. But I feel like that theme should be reflected in the monsters somehow, or
Yes.
and this is very difficult because it requires you to be a good writer. But if you look at Silent Hill 2, where Pyramid Head, for example, is portrayed consistent. The monsters in Pyramid Head, the monsters in Silent Hill 2, sorry, are Pyramid Head, who was seen sexually abusing people throughout the game. Uh, and we also see lots of burning house imagery, which is related to one of the people's trauma. And we see mannequins that are just like four legs that walk around, which reflects the main character's sexual guilt. And it's a very neat kind of they're doing the theme in designing the monsters, and the monsters are very fucking scary, but also significant narratively. Whereas
Hmm.
here, it just felt like those themes are completely dropped when it comes to the monsters, and it was just fish people. It was very strange.
Yeah, I think you can also do a thing of the true emotional horror existing in opposition to the actual monster. So the fact that they could have spent the entire film essentially having to escape from this monster and it being a constant threat, but really emotionally the arc of the film is dealing um with their guilt and rationalizing with each other, possibly some interpersonal conflict or anything like that. But this film is just wrapped up in nothing. I don't. I think you're so right to talk about like this sort of sense of lost ambition because they neither spend time with any sort of interpersonal relations beyond like, oh no, my sad lost spouse, or like as in like, oh no, what if this person dies right now, that kind of thing, or just like yeah, walking around the seafloor with not much happening, and again, just when the monsters do show up, there's sort of no there's such under the design of these like smaller monsters is so underwhelming. They're
Mm.
kind of always shown as these vague white silhouettes, and they really are just like people but fish. And you could even have something like haunting and disturbing, like I don't know, maybe fucking they were people, and maybe you could have something about losing people. I don't know, but it would be something. But this is nothing. It is nothing. This film is so nothing. I've never felt so little while watching one of these films. Oh my god, it's so bereft
Yeah.
of tension and even atmosphere. And the look of this film is quite evocative, but it just loses it in execution.
I think what you say about like how interpersonal relationships can enrich a film like this is so integral in actually making it scary. So,
Hmm.
for example, one of my favorite monster films, 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is, in my opinion, not a very subversive film. It just is a straight up monster film. but just done very well. And what's so good about that film, in my opinion, is it really takes time to like flesh out John Goodman's character, and you spend the whole film like, is John Goodman just fucking crazy, and like has he just kidnapped these people and are trapping them? And that like tension throughout of like not knowing if the characters are going insane or not, or if there's actually a monster behind it all. Puts you in that conspiratorial alien monster mood that actually makes the alien scarier. The idea that at the end of this film, maybe there will be an alien, or what is scarier, them being an alien or just these people being crazy, like those, and that, in my opinion, that isn't a super art housey film, but it's not difficult to write your characters with like care. And again, this film like almost does it. Like I really like the thing of giving what's that nigga's name? The thing with giving TJ Miller like a teddy bear toy thing was, I thought, like a neat kind of character trait that endeared me to his character, told me a bit about what he's like as a person. But yeah, not enough. And I was really disappointed in the other white guy. I do not remember his name. I don't even remember how the character's introduced, but ends up being like there ends up being like a romance between him and Emily, which came out of nowhere, like was never really explained. It was just very. I felt like everything in this film feels half baked, and it's even more aggravating because it's at least half baked. I can see glimpses of how it could be good, and they just don't commit to anything.
Yeah, and I just think like at this point, if you're doing this setup and this story, the monsters are your biggest strength here. What's working against you is having quite a conventional cast and setup for this kind of film, like especially just harkening back to Alien, and you really need to lean into what makes your film unique here, and it incredibly doesn't. I remember when we were watching this together, like we finally got to the part where it's revealed that yes, there has been a huge monster this whole time, and it's nothing. In reality, what does the presence of that monster do in terms of story? Actually nothing, because in the sense of where the audience's mind is at that point, the base is already collapsing. At this point, the fact that we've seen that it's been a large monster after all isn't this great thematic conclusion and resolution or this huge sense of horror. It's just, oh, I guess it wasn't an earthquake. It's literally that, and then the base is going to be destroyed anyway. It literally has no point when you could have something here of the utter horror at such an inconceivable and indestructible enemy. Come on, like you have such a strength here, and it does just leave me wondering, like, did most of the budget just go on like set design and things like that? Because that's not interesting. Like, it's cool that the suits look really cool, but I'd rather get to see more of this giant monster.
And like you said before, with how we've already covered that the monster design isn't interesting or aesthetically exciting, so it's kind of failing as a monster film. With, like you said, with this final reveal of the monster, I think it's also failing as a cosmic horror film. Cosmic horror, like fans of cosmic horror aren't fans of it because ooh wee, big, scary. They're fans of it because of like the existential questions it raises about our significance in the universe. And think about H.P. Bummergo talked in his video about cosmic horror about the 2007 film Cthulhu, where there is this like conspiratorial cosmic horror plot happening in the background, but the real cosmic horror is being a gay man sat in a room with your family, and they're trying, and you having to convince them that your existence is worth something, and knowing you can't leave this room, and knowing you have to deal with these complicated feelings with them, and feeling like a complete outsider in that sense, and just how like that would weight on someone. Or same with the game Bloodborne, where there is like really cosmic shit happening, but the point of that game is like the more knowledge you get, the more painful living becomes, and to the point where you just become a husk of a person. And is it worth knowing these dark truths? Does it mean anything to know things? These are the you have to deal with these kind of questions as a cosmic horror. You don't just get by showing us the big squid thing,
Yeah.
slightly hinting at maybe even I guess it slightly hints at trying to say a thing about the cosmic horror of losing people, but it's never comfortable to sit in that feeling for too long.
No.
It's only short asides, and it just should lean more into it.
I think it's just damning that it because I completely agree with you. That's what films like this should be trying to do on some level, along with what else they're trying to achieve horror wise, but also that this film can't even achieve the sheer visceral fear level. Like it's not good enough for cosmic horror, but it's also too shallow and like unassured to even just give us like the big scary monster that a film like Cloverfield can. Not 10 Cloverfield Lane, I mean the original Cloverfield. So I think we should probably wrap this up. I'll just give a quick this. I would not recommend this, and that is with as someone who watches a lot of these movies and they get by on just cool monster woo, and it's just boring. It's the most damning thing you can say about it. It's just completely spends the whole time meandering, and as you watch it, you're constantly thinking of ways that I don't have the mechanical talent to make a film like this yet, but just I think anyone can watch this film and imagine ways that they could have made it more interesting or enjoyable. And that's really damning. So yeah, I just can't recommend this film.
Yeah, I'd give this a mild not recommend. I think there is enough interesting stuff in the film to latch onto at points. I really like that opening scene. TJ Miller, I don't typically like him, but he actually did bring a lot of color to this really bland, boring cast.
Weirdly, one of the better parts.
He was decent, and you know what? I liked Kristen Stewart a lot in this film. I think she had nothing to work with.
Absolutely nothing.
In my opinion, she carried a lot of pathos in her character and a lot of quiet strength, and I really understood this as a no bullshit person who is kind of a mentor figure to everyone else in the group, and someone who's quite emotionally numb to things but doesn't want to watch the younger people be broken in the way she is. That's
true.
So I think she did a really good performance given how nothing it was.
She brought a lot of character to
yeah. And I also in a Resident Evil way, in the Resident Evil franchise of films, granted none of this is as entertaining as that franchise, which is incredible. But
so entertaining.
I did like the ending where she gives a monologue about feeling spawned in the face of cosmic horror. Then it's just let's blow this shit up, and then everything explodes. I thought that was delightful. I really like that ending. So yeah, I think there's stuff in here that you can enjoy, but overall, I think it's probably not that good, and it's probably more fun monster movies out there. And I think making a film like this, I would have preferred if they either took it super seriously and went harder on the themes, or if they took it super silly and just went harder with just the fucking being dumb and pulpy. It's a bit in the middle. Yeah, I'm just at a decent not recommend. It wasn't that good, was it?
You could even have a movie in the middle where it's there's this giant monster and they're constantly trying to scramble for survival, and it just completely wrecks their plans every step of the way, it was so easy. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up because I could talk about my sadness about this for ages. What music are we talking about next episode, Josh?
Awesome. So next time we're going to be talking about Throbbing Gristle's 20 jazz funk greats. So if
Amazing.
you're into jazz, if you're into funk, I recommend you tune in, check it out, and check the album out. I mean, especially if you're into jazz and funk, check the album out. Super chill listen. Very good like background music, I'd say. And if you're throwing like a dinner party or something and you just want something to really soundtrack the small talk, I think this is the album for you.
Yeah, if you're having like a garden meetup, because
Yeah.
social distance and everything like that, like it's quite, and if you just want something kind of in the background to like ease the conversation along, it's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Awesome. So yeah, thanks very much for listening. Subscribe if you enjoyed wherever you're listening, like on YouTube or Spotify, whatever the equivalent is. And just check out our social media for like updates on episodes and things like that. And also just to see how fucking cool us are. I know you probably see it wherever you're listening to this, but it's nice to just look at. It's pretty. On Instagram, it's Minority Arts Podcast, and on Twitter, it's @ArtsMinority. So yeah, thanks very much for listening, and tune in next time to hear us talk about Throbbing Gristle's 20 Jazz Funk Greats.
See ya.